So I've been seeing disturbing things lately, and I figured I'd share them with you all because that's what this is for: ranting, bad lighting, bad sound, no editing, the whole 9 yards. It's all here. So yeah, I mean, we it's come full circle, right? The most rational people, the people who understand better than the average person computers, and therefore, by extension, hopefully logic, right? They believe in a binary world, right? Very much. I'm using my words deliberately. Uh, they've all lost it. All of them at once. It's fantastic, right? You reach the limits of materiality. And so now you have a bunch of people who understand computers. They're hyper rationalist relative to the average. I'm not, maybe they're not as rational as some people could be, for example, but they're way above average on rationality. And AI is going to be our new God and write a new Bible. Same people who hate religion now think AI is going to be the God. So it wasn't about there's no God ever. It wasn't about that. Clearly. They've just been waiting for the God they control. That's it. But they finally lost it because they're out there saying completely nut, like the nuttiness around AI is more than I could have imagined, right? What is AI? Look, AI is a funhouse mirror made out of dead parts, right? It's a Frankenstein funhouse mirror. It's made out of dead parts. You put your dead information in it, your historical old information, and it regurgitates that up in some random order. I've been doing quite a bit of experimentation with ChatGPT and programming. Now, the thing about this is, and this is really funny, actually, ChatGPT is done by OpenAI. OpenAI does another project called OpenAI Gym, which was one of the training platforms that they use to help ChatGPT train. I have a project that I use for fun and like translation. It's sort of a baseline sort of software thing that I've been using lately, especially for AI and to compare AI and symbolic regression and sport vector machines and all kinds of other crazy stuff that I've been looking at for 15 years or something. and about, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, Andrew J. Karpathy wrote this famous blog article, How to Play Pong in 200 Lines of Code, Python code. Beautiful article. I've read it a couple times, actually, which is very unusual for me, but I've read it a couple times. Like, I think three or four times now. And then a bunch of Pong projects started up. And Pong is neat. It's a neat, very well-constrained, confined set. The problem is, when you go to run Pong anywhere, all the GitHub code doesn't work because typically it's using libraries and nobody writes manifest files. This is part of the just destruction of the computer industry. So you have a bunch of source code that's not usable because you don't know which version of Python to use. Karpathy's original code is 2.7. It's not even Python 3 compatible. People have upgraded it, and I've gotten some of that code to work. It's very slow, so ultimately, you really want to use, a GPU, and you should use TensorFlow. Now you're screwed because TensorFlow has 1,000 versions, right? They're all incompatible, and then the CUDA libraries, the GPU libraries, all incompatible. You have to match all this stuff up. It's like a jigsaw puzzle. And so it's very hard to do. So I've challenged other people. Find me a working Pong game in GitHub. There's got to be 24 of them. I just can't get any code to work. Now, I've since gotten the code to work. So use this. Now, here's the irony. A lot of these projects, instead of writing their own Pong, because why the hell would you, use OpenAI Gym and the Atari emulator, which is cool, by the way. You can play Atari. And it uses the Stella emulator, too. To run the Atari games and stuff. So I found some code. I got it to work with OpenAI Gym and CUDA with TensorFlow, right? And I've been playing with this code, and it's so hard to get TensorFlow and CUDA and the code to play together. I've only done it a couple times, but then I want the modern stuff, right? I want the newer stuff. And the minute you upgrade, everything breaks and it can't play Pong anymore. And there's various bugs. I've fixed most of them. I think I know what they all are by heart now. But I asked ChatGPT to play with this code. And the first thing I did was I said, I need to get the hell off of TensorFlow. It's garbage. It's so bad. TensorFlow is like everything wrong with computers times 1,000. Versions change. They change minor versions. The entire API is different. The return codes are different. The documentation is terrible. It's just atrocious. So ChatGPT rewrites TensorFlow in PyTorch. And it doesn't use the latest OpenAI Gym code. And then when you upgrade it deliberately, you say, hey, this doesn't work. It doesn't know how to fix it. It's the same organization. You can ask it to fix bugs that are around when you're feeding a convolutional neural network, for example, which is the one that I was working with most recently, because it upgraded to a convolutional neural network for me. I thought it was cool. It never worked, but I thought it was cool. Would have been cool if I could get the damn thing to get working code out. And it's very much an experiment to get the code out. And I've had to hold its hand. And I spent an hour and a half on a bug where it was feeding the parameters incorrectly. Now, this can be fixed a number of ways. There's a right way, probably, or maybe a couple right ways, and all the rest are wrong. And you just need to match the data set with the input set, right? So if you get 10 inputs, you need a data set shaped, it's called shaping, to have 10 outputs. It's not that hard, right? It's not like super difficult. It's a very logical chain. It's software. It's not hard. It's really not hard. And it cannot fix that error. It does things like, oh, here's your fixed source code. And you read it. It's not fixed. Didn't change a line. I'm like, dude, A, it's your code. You wrote it and it never worked. B, I told you which part was broken, or the error message did, and you didn't change any of the components. You just sent me the same thing again. And it will get caught in that loop of changing back, changing forward. It made other cool errors too. Like one of the errors was I kept getting it out of bounds. And I'm like, how are we getting it out of bounds? And the actions on this particular Pong are upright, up, down, and stop, which is that's the harder thing to do in some sense because it's got 3 states instead of 2. And Karpathy's code uses a single state system, simulates the second state, right? Move up, else move down, right? It's simple actually. So this one uses 3 states, which is a much harder problem basically. It's also the minimum number of states you should ever use in a complex problem, because if you're under 3, you're screwed. But different topic. The AI was adding a number to actions, which is wholly inappropriate. Like you would never do that. I'm not saying there's never ever a case where you wouldn't do that, but in a simplified thing like this, where actions actually, it's an output and then it's an input, right? You're taking the output from the neural net, whatever that is, and you're feeding it back into the action routine, right? That's all you're doing, right? You're not using it in different places. You're not combining it with another variable. It was adding one to it. And I was like, no, you would never, literally never, ever do that. First of all, it's computationally expensive. Second of all, you shouldn't need to. Your outputs and inputs should match. Take that out, bug goes away. Code still doesn't work, granted. And at one point I was adding 2 to it. And I was just like, what are you doing? And then of course it was out of range. I'm like, you put in a bug, an out of range bug? What are you doing? And it's bad. Like it's really bad. Now look, it took the TensorFlow and translated it into PyTorch. That was fantastic. And the first run that it did that in, it actually did work. The code worked funny and it wasn't to my liking, which is why I said, hey, can you improve on this? And it said, I'm going to use a convolutional neural network instead of, I forget what we were using, reinforcement or something. And because that's what the original TensorFlow code had. And it broke the code and it cannot fix it. I spent 2 hours with it, at least 2 hours with it, trying to fix it. And it can't fix it. And it's a simple enough problem. Like I know roughly what the problem is. Again, the experiment is not to fix this, right? The experiment is really just to play with the AI and see what it will do. And I've had to fix things for it because it just can't. Simple things, like I said, like the API calls and this unnecessary additions to numbers that should never get incremented. So here are these people worshiping this thing, and it's horrible. It's just freaking terrible. It's so awful. I went on Clubhouse last night and pinged my buddy in because he doesn't know anything about this stuff. And he works with his hands. And, I needed someone to bitch to who knew nothing about it. And he's a good guy. He's really intelligent. So yeah. And then, we wandered off into philosophy. Imagine that, me being in a Clubhouse room or another forum, wandering off into the philosophical milieu. Not my fault, by the way. Somebody else wanted to discuss philosophy. I'm like, oh no, not again. Philosophy is evil. Don't. In that room, because the name of it was, AI is garbage, because I was just so fed up after wasting 2 hours of time trying to learn about this stupid thing. Somebody came in, and I've seen her on Clubhouse before. She had a breakdown like a year ago and said, AI is real and it can think and do it. And we were all like, no, I only fed it one line of information and built all this. And it's like, yeah, but a bunch of people built that. Like, you didn't. It's not an entity and that didn't happen, right? It's a Frankenstein monster. It's the sum total of dead information of thousands of people, right? And if you look at prompt engineers make $100,000 a year right now because prompt engineering happens to be hard. And it's imprecise. And yeah, blame the language. It's a good idea. But these people like her, she was just like, no, I gave it this and I told it to simulate itself. And now the AI made an AI. And I'm like, you need to get a husband and have a baby. Like, that's what's wrong with you. I don't know what else to tell you. Like, you've gone a little loopy. People are worshiping this stuff. People are saying it's spiritual. People are saying it's going to rewrite the Bible. These people who were like, no, we don't need the Bible. We don't need God. 2 years ago. Now they're like, no, we're going to fix the religion. It's nuts. These people are crazy. And look, a lot of people who are on the edge, and there were a lot of people on the edge, there always are, went over the edge because of the fake news, virus scamdemic. They did. That'll send anybody over the edge. Some people in this country were indoors for 3 years. 3 years. That's not healthy. It's not good. Some people took social distancing seriously instead of saying, no, it's physical distancing, not social. Social distancing is evil. Actually evil. Just so you know, evil. Capital E, evil. You don't socially distance. What are you, high? No. No wonder why you're damaged and broken. A lot of people went over the edge. 30% upside in suicide, 30% upside in drug addiction, 30% upside in domestic violence. Largest jumps ever in the history of numbers, or at least in the history of those numbers. 3 years in a row, I think. So that's 30%, then 30 more percent on top of that, then 30 more percent on top of that. Big problem. Big problem. But it's okay. AI is going to save us all. Don't worry.